Good morning. Good morning, J-Dog. Good morning, all of you, our great sponsors and advertisers and listeners, most importantly. Thank you very much. Good morning, New Hampshire. Good morning up into Maine. A lot of listeners now up into Portland with our additional FM coverage and strength, 98.7 HD2, 98. 1 FM, 1270 AM, Dover, Rochester, Portsmouth, Barrington, you name it, Greenland, Stratham, and then, of course, 107.7 FM, 107.3 FM, Lakes Region, in addition to 98.3 FM HD2, our network. The Pulse of an H. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. Worldwide, you can listen to us like we're there next to you in Portugal or England or Toronto, depending on the time, but we're 9 to noon, weekdays. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. Play the Pulse of an H. Our poll question up on X this morning at the Pulse of an H. You just heard in our national news from Fox. The tensions in Minneapolis and the hotspot really for the nation on all things immigration enforcement have to do with what's next. We just simply ask you this morning, while Minnesota, Minneapolis officials want ICE to leave and stop illegal immigration enforcement, ICE intends to continue. We just ask you and actually send more agents, more federal agents to Minneapolis and not stop. Do you think ICE should reduce its presence in Minneapolis? Yes or no? That's our simple poll question on X down the middle. Do you think ICE should reduce its presence and operations in Minneapolis? Yes or no? J-Dog will have results from yesterday. Got a lot going on this morning, J-Dog. Before we get to some of the heavy-duty stuff, it's kind of a little bit of blue sky, more clouds, but I think it's on the milder side, and it continues this week on milder temps. But Thursday, I guess we look at a little bit of a mixed bag, but we stay on the mild side. Well, now, J-Dog, we know the Patriots will be facing the Houston Texans last night. What a lackluster game. You may not agree with me, J-Dog. I watched it when it was like 7-6, and the needle didn't move at all for Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers at home. I think his days for retirement are now. So the Patriots will be hosting Houston, J-Dog.
Sunday they will be, and Rodgers is cooked. That being said, there's a chance he could be the starter for the Minnesota Vikings next year because they're not sold on J.J. McCarthy and want one more year of an experienced quarterback to study behind him, I guess.
You know what it is? I'm going to tell you what it is. You and I talked before the show. He's had an incredible Hall of Fame career. I don't think anyone would argue. And he would, parts of what he said last night after the game were pretty true. It was an honor to play a year in Pittsburgh with their great tradition of excellence and all the years he had with the Packers. But I'm just going to say this, J-Dog. There's something about Rodgers that bugs me. It's not that he's good and successful. He's just strange. And I was saying to you before the show, I'm not an offensive coordinator. But I did say in the Jacksonville-Buffalo game this weekend, live when I was watching it with, friends, if you're Lawrence and you have no timeouts left and you got a minute and you got to get down to kick a field goal to tie the game, why are you throwing the ball like a duck in the middle of the field for a pick? Why not the sideline thing? So my question with Rodgers, J-Dog, is this. He throws balls, and he's that good. He throws balls that are 10 yards away from the receiver, and then the eye thing. His eye thing, and he starts shaking his head, rolling his eyes like it's his receiver's fault, like they're not on the same page. They played the whole season together. When you look at Drake May, Josh Allen, J-Dog, if they miss a pass to a receiver, it's within inches, like fingertips. Rodgers throws the ball, it's 10 yards away, and he starts getting mad at the receiver.
Why weren't you there? Yeah.
Why weren't you there? What are you talking about? That's not our pattern. Well, I'm Aaron Rodgers. When I throw the ball, you're supposed to be there. I think it's done. Anyway, Texans, you weren't surprised with the defense?
Not at all. They're the hottest team in the NFL right now. And you know what? I'm telling you that just ride that defense. Just ride it. Create all kinds of chaos, as evidenced last night in Pittsburgh.
All right. By the way, we're going to maybe talk a little bit today with some of our contributors. Supreme Court nationally continuing to hear oral arguments on transgender athletes in women's sports. This is one of those issues that or topics, even locally, that won't go away. Try asking a candidate. Here's a good one. I did this on my show live. I won't say the candidate or the race, but some of you remember it. Try asking a candidate running for office. Some will answer the question. This simple question. So you're running for Congress, which is a federal elected seat in New Hampshire, for example. And on my show, if I ask you, do you support men playing in women's sports in high school and college, or boys playing in girls' sports? Do you support that? Buckle up and get a translator, because they're not going to answer the question. It's amazing. It's amazing. Instead of just saying yes or no, they don't want to answer the question because they don't want to offend any of their base. If they say, no, I don't think boys should be playing in girls' sports. And you know what I don't understand in this whole transgender or boys and girls sports thing? And I'm being serious. And I'm the dad of a couple of daughters who played sports. How long did women, J-Dog, you would know this better than me with title this or title. How long did women fight for better status and representation in college and all that with women's sports? They fought for how long? To protect the sovereignty of women in sports. I don't want to go through why I think it should be women and girls and women and girls sports. It's not that I have this inherent issue with what you do or your kid's life. I don't really care. I wish people health and happiness and wellness. But at some level, at some age, whether it's boxing, wrestling, competitive physical sports, at some point, or track, at some point, there is a physical biological difference, but I'm not running for Congress. So if you don't agree with me, in all due respect, that's fine. You have every right to. There is a biological, physical, muscular, whatever you want, bone density. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an orthopedic difference between men and women. Now, a lot of people don't want to say that. So I remember the boxing stuff and the Italian, I think she was an Italian boxer. She got pummeled by this person who went on to win the gold medal. And you can't tell me what I saw. You can't tell me I didn't see what I saw. But I look at these cases, and it's just now it's going to the Supreme Court, and they continue arguments today. But good luck trying to ask someone who's seeking your vote, and I'm not running for office, to run for Congress, where do you stand on this issue? And you're going to have to get a political translator, because after 10 minutes, you're not going to know what the hell they answered you, but they won't answer the question. Many of them. Some will, not all. I also had to comment real quickly. I reposted this earlier, and this is a good one. One of our great listeners forwarded me this. I don't know when the date was, but this is hilarious.
A little bit disturbed and distraught at the last meeting because you let all manner of riffraff in here. You had voters and...
So I'm not going to expect you to understand all that, but this is a Durham, New Hampshire resident. And he put on like a British monarch Tory wig. Have you ever seen British parliamentary politics? One party will wear these wigs. And of course the wigs, the Tory, whatever. But he goes in complaining about Durham, New Hampshire, once again raising property taxes on the taxpayers. And if you look back to our roots as a country, revolutionary independence, the stamp tax, taxation without representation, the British. In fact, New Hampshire just celebrated its anniversary, 250, how many years ago, become one of the first colonies, New Hampshire, the state of New Hampshire became one of the first eventual American colonies to break away from the crown, the British crown, and form its own and have its own constitution. And most of you go back to the Tea Party in Boston, you go back to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, most of the early activity pushing away from the monarch, British, was over taxation. So this character in Durham, great sense of humor, shows up at a meeting and respectfully goes into this English kind of accent oratory, almost like a theatrical performance with the wig on, basically joking, but in a respectful. He wasn't one of these people going to a public or town hall meeting yelling and screaming. He just went on and quietly, with his brain and his theatrical abilities, thanked sarcastically the managers of Durham, New Hampshire, for once again screwing over the property taxpayers and raising property taxes. Let me be crystal clear on property taxes. I posted a video from my show here, Good Morning New Hampshire, on the Pulse of an H. about a month ago, where's all the money? Where's all the money? Because I was noticing in some commentary on my show like this that town managers in Maine, Vermont were all complaining that the property tax growth and the rates, the property taxes going through the roof and all these other taxes. But where's the money to run the ambulance and the library and the police and the public works in town? Where's all the money? All these other states have income taxes, plural, like Vermont has 2, Mass has 2 income tax, sales taxes. New Hampshire is the only state that doesn't have an income or sales tax. And where's all the money? You can tax people till they have no more money to spend. And if you want to spend it, you're going to be able to spend tax dollars. And there's never going to be enough money for the potholes in town on the roads. There's never going to be enough money for the schools if you have an endless spending budget. But you'll run out of taxpayers at some point who can no longer pay. And Durham, New Hampshire, classically, and this is something I don't understand, home of University of New Hampshire, Durham, they got all that infrastructure. They're home to Durham. They get no breaks or no break at all. I understand that UNH is here. It's like Bowdoin College, which is a private college in Brunswick. Brunswick has huge property taxes in Maine. But UNH has the flagship state university system school. And Durham, New Hampshire is known as one of those communities that has very high property taxes. And all the local managers have to do is stop spending money at the level they're spending it and give property taxpayers a break instead of each year screwing the property taxpayers over and saying, we're going to raise your property taxes. Do you know in Vermont, where other than a Republican governor in the past or now, even Democrat lawmakers in Montpelier, Vermont are saying, we got to dial back these local school budgets. We just got to stop spending so much. So it's real simple. If you're in Durham, I don't know if you can have like an old-fashioned revolt like the British and the early American patriots or, New Hampshire patriots. But the people in Durham have to tell the managers in town, don't raise our property taxes anymore. In fact, start reducing them, even if it means more kids in a classroom. I shared with you once in my show years ago in the frugal sort of Yankee town north of Boston of Marblehead and Swampscott, Mass. Now, I know you hear the term Marblehead today and you think of affluence and Marblehead Neck. But when I grew up in Marblehead and Swampscott, there were plenty of carpenters next door, plumbing and heating people, pilots, doctors, and fishermen. Families that had lived there for generations. And I'll never forget, because I was a student at the General Glover School in Marblehead. And they had a dilemma because the town was growing modestly, and they didn't know if they needed to build another, I don't know what the grade is, you call it, elementary or middle school, I guess it would be today, middle school. They wanted to know if they needed to build another middle school. But they weren't sure. Someone said at a meeting who was smart, well, what it's going to cost all this money, and money was money back then too, to build a middle school. But what happens if 2 or 3 years the population enrollments level off and we don't need 2 middle schools? That was what you call Yankee frugal thinking. So you know what they did? Smart people in a town meeting versus just keep screwing the property taxes over, property taxpayers over. They said, let's do this. We're going to study it for a year. No increase in taxation locally. We're going to split the school day right down the middle in the alphabet. So A through whatever, G or H, and then H through Z, whoever going to go to school a little bit earlier. So 7 instead of 8 in the morning, school will be done at 12:30. And then at 1 o'clock, we have a second session till 4 o'clock. And they split the school day. So one school continued the growth and they split the school day in half versus building a new school. So in Durham, New Hampshire, if you're tired of your property taxes going through the blanket roof and you don't have the money, and you love your home, you gotta be a little bit louder, respectfully, civilly, peacefully, and lawfully, and let the people managing the town, either through elections or let them know collectively, you've had enough. And they got to stop spending. And where they're spending the most money is on schools. And here's the irony: enrollments are coming down, not going up. Some commentary, 603-228-2080. We'll come back. We'll update you on the latest from the Federal Reserve, believe it or not. A little bit later on, 9:35, Dean Spiliotis going a little bit early. And then Mike Cody, an interesting business interview on the 10 o'clock hour about states like Florida, speaking of taxes, getting upset that retirees can't afford to move there anymore because of local property taxes. And they're even thinking about getting rid of property taxes in states like Florida. You've heard DeSantis. But in the 10 o'clock hour, we're going to introduce you to a surgeon, an orthopedic surgeon, who just completed a robotic shoulder replacement. Hey, Alexa, Google, play the Pulse of an H. Back in a moment.
Sundays at 3 on the Pulse.
Give results from yesterday's poll. Our poll question this morning up on X at the Pulse of an H. Everything with us, Pulse of an H. There's a debate in Minneapolis, obviously, over ICE enforcement, federal immigration enforcement, and the presence of federal law enforcement officers. And obviously, the people in Minneapolis, a lot of them don't want them there. But ICE is going to continue to send more, upwards of 1,000 more agents to enforce immigration laws. I heard one stat. Since December, 2,000 illegal immigrants who've been wanted legally for breaking U.S. law have been picked up. Do you think here's a poll question this morning. Do you think ICE should reduce its presence in Minneapolis, its presence in Operation Presence, yes or no? Simple question. J-Dog, results from yesterday?
Should the U.S. intervene militarily in Iran? 88.9% no, 11.1% yes.
All right. Thank you. Good stuff, J-Dog. And I do believe, some commentary, this unrest in especially Tehran is good to see, not for the loss of life and killing of protesters and death, but a breaking of the back of the hardline fundamental Islamic rulers of Tehran, who, by the way, give women and girls no rights. So half the people here protesting against efforts to break the juggernaut in Iran don't even understand how they treat people like women and girls with voting and driving and rights. Yeah, like beyond comprehension. I've never understood that. All these activists here who don't even understand how the Taliban or the rulers in Tehran treat their citizens, especially women. And more women in this country should get educated to that before they go to a protest for or against Tehran, where they're chanting death to Americans, death to the U.S. But I'd much rather support this effort of unrest there in other ways than militarily poking our nose into that place. At some point, I worry about us spreading ourselves too thin or having too much intervention policies. However, the in and out strategic stuff, like the bombing of the nuclear the sites in the mountains in Iran that were so strategic with our stealth bombers, that was a thing of beauty and artwork, but we were in and out. They never knew we were there, and we set their nuclear ambitions back. And that's a good thing, because that's one country that we as an American people, if you go back to 9/11, you never want them to ever able to get a nuclear capability, because they would use it against the West. Some commentary. Just real quick, I'm going to go back to Durham, New Hampshire, and this property tax story, because Durham is notoriously famous for very high per capita property taxes. Not that it's not a beautiful, great, well-run community. It is. But if you look at the level of property taxes in Durham, it's outrageous. And today, I'm always I wonder sometimes, because I think people that spend 50 years in Durham, their kids are no longer in school, or if a police officer or an ambulance driver or a school teacher or a nurse live in Durham, you got to give these people breaks on their property taxes so they can afford to live in the town. And you can't start kicking seniors out of their home because you're charging them $16,000 a year in property taxes and they have no kids in the school. When the hell are we going to get creative here? I personally think that some of these towns that are getting hosed, and I would tell you, don't tell me it's getting that expensive to run education and services in Durham, New Hampshire. Don't give me that. You can't BS me on that. Durham is not that big of a community. You can never have enough public services. You can never have enough new roads. You can never have enough money for your schools. But don't tell me it's that outrageous. Don't tell me you don't have enough money to better manage a town with less. Because these people paying your property taxes have to do it in their households with healthcare costs, groceries, cost of living, money in, money out, money in. And that's how a town should be run. And if you have been raising property taxes every year on your citizens, putting people that grew up in the town or a senior citizen who's on Social Security and fixed income out of their home, there's something wrong with you, morally and fiscally, not the property taxpayer. So you get creative to allow your people to live in that town who can afford it. You give breaks to the public, the people that are working in healthcare and law enforcement and EMTs and firefighters. You give breaks to the seniors and everyone else. You don't have to hose them. But you know what people need to start doing is get a lawyer or someone to represent a class of property taxpayers in town and just say, we're going to pay last year's property taxes because we can't afford to pay any more. So we're not delinquent. You want to kick us out of our homes? Go ahead and try. But only paying last year's until you people start capping and reducing our property taxes. And until we have elections in the next election, if you're telling me I owe $14,000 in property taxes and my half-year bill is $7,000, I'm sending in $5,000. You don't like it? Here's my lawyer. Do you think the Durham town manager is going to start kicking 100 people out of their homes because they can't afford $7,000 for half a year property taxes or $8,000? I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but do it peacefully, lawfully, smartly, and civilly. I think we formed a country. We form a country, and New Hampshire was a leading state in that effort to break away from the British over taxation. Just some history. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of Nature. Come back. Dean Spiliotis will weigh in on some of the politics of the day, and then 10 o'clock, we'll introduce you to a surgeon who completed successfully, I guess, one of the first here locally, robotic shoulder replacement surgery. Back in a moment.
News, information. State's largest landscape and snow management firm, proudly serving commercial properties from Greater Manchester to Greater Boston. Visit them online at outdoorpride.com. Now, back to Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
I guess I hit a few nerves or got some people thinking before we bring in our next guest, Dean Spiliotis, back with us, Southern New Hampshire University political science professor. I was talking about one of our listeners shared with me a Durham recent town hall meeting in Durham, New Hampshire on the property tax hikes. And I just said in towns like Durham, at some point, the taxpayers, I mean, we formed a country over this with taxation and breaking away from the British, have to push back if you're just getting priced out of your homes. And education, local education is a big piece of this. And you know what's interesting is an educator or someone, I'm just going to read what they sent in. I believe this is accurate because I know from past interviews. Do you know that in New Hampshire, and maybe Dean Spiliotis knows the answer to this on education, but in New Hampshire, and I'm a big fan and proud father of an educator, so please, in New Hampshire, we spend closer to $30,000 in public money per student for public education a year, $28,000 a year. We're not talking to send your child to UNH in Durham or Southern New Hampshire University where Dean teaches. We're talking public, elementary, up to high school education. We're spending about 28 grand a year, I think, on average per student. So think of your household budget for a minute. My UVM math dean would tell me 27 and 28 is closer to 30,000 than 20. And some people in the towns and cities say it's not enough money we need to spend more. And yet some people are spending in their property taxes. Dover, New Hampshire, huge increases. Durham, 14,000 a year. So every half year you get a property tax bill for 7 or 8 grand. You've lived in the town. It used to be half that. And you're like, okay, I know things go up, but this is ridiculous. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Dean Spiliotis, Southern Hampshire University. Good morning, Dean.
Hey, good morning, Jack. When I was growing up in New York, we used to call this the battle between the young families with children and the retired senior citizens. Whenever there would be a vote on some sort of improvement to the high school or some sort of new facility, your property taxes would take a hit, and you could always kind of figure out, where the battle lines were going to be in terms of the different people in different phases of their lives and kind of different socioeconomic strata. It's a very sensitive, complicated issue for everyone, and there are real discrepancies across different locations, different kinds of facilities. You factor in the cost of education for, staff and faculty and healthcare and pensions and all that sort of stuff. It's a constant battle. And here in New Hampshire, no doubt, I know plenty of seniors who feel like they're getting priced out of their communities where they've been for, 30, 40 years in some cases.
And, I, excuse me, Dean, I shared earlier a story where I grew up in, I never grew up, but north of Boston, when I was in elementary or middle school. Marblehead, Mass, of all places, had a debate with the General Glover School because the population was growing a little bit of young families, and the old frugal New England mentality said, before we build 2 middle schools,
right,
let's split the school day in half for a year until we figure out if there's population increase, if we need the 2 middle schools, and study it. And that's what they did. So if you were Spiliotis, your name begins with S, you're going to start school at noon on weekdays and go to 4. And if your name began with C or D, you'd go in the morning at 7 to noon. And we did that.
Right.
And it was no big inconvenience. Everyone adjusted. But, today, there's no innovation. Like, I don't know why, if you added up in a town like Durham or Dover, how many people over 70 live in town? You could probably find that, right? You'd know that number,
sure.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, you can figure it out. Yeah.
Okay. Of those 70-year-olds, how many have lived here for at least 20 years in town and they have no kids in the school system? You probably figure that out. So they're going to pay 50% less property taxes. That's just what we're going to do to keep them in town because they can't afford $14,000 a year. They're going to lose their house on School Street or Smith Street. And by the way, if you're an EMT, teacher, nurse, firefighter, police officer, and you live in town and serve this town, you're also going to pay half. And that's the way it's going to be. And we're not going to stop raising property taxes on everyone else, but they're going to pay more because they got kids in school. Why can't we do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a possibility because, as I've said, that ends up being the battle over, what kinds of programs to fund in public schools, what kind of, whether to build new facilities, whether to make do with existing facilities. I mentioned growing up in New York, I remember a titanic battle over whether or not to build a indoor swimming pool and have a swim team.
Yeah.
And it split exactly along the lines of, people who had an interest in that versus everybody else in the town who had no interest in that and thought it was excessive. So I mean, this is it's a tough it's a tough battle. It would be nice to figure out some way to give seniors who are no longer sending their children there some kind of relief.
Well, you just got to do it, Dean. I mean, if you and I were school board members or town council members, we could sit there and talk civilly and say, what do you think? Okay, what would be the impact? There are smart people, and you can figure out if we did this, how many people are there? If the town, I'm being hypothetical, if the town had 8,000 residents and 12% were over 70, I mean, you and I could figure this numbers out. We could actually sit there and figure out if we cut their property taxes 40%, can we still run the town? We could figure it out.
Yeah, well, the irony here is, the argument I often hear made is, even if you don't have kids in the school system anymore, the better the school, the more valuable your home. But the irony is, the more valuable your home, the higher your property taxes are driven up.
Well, you know what happened? I'm sorry, this is a subject I didn't expect, but you know what, Dean, this is going to carry because we always talk about the world stuff. But when Portsmouth, New Hampshire recently went through a reevaluation they haven't gone through, and you know how much prices have just doubled on homes in Portsmouth. It's crazy. You can't get a home there under $1 million, really. It was good news if you wanted to sell your home. The problem I heard from everyone is, where are you going to move? And then the city planners said, we're not going to raise our property tax rate. But dumb me said, okay, my UVM math. If my home, if I'm a Portsmouth resident, I pay $500,000. And when you do your reevaluation, if it's worth $1.1 million, I don't care if you change the property tax rate. I know I'm going to be paying twice as much almost in property taxes because you're now valuing my home twice as much with the property. Right. And that's happening in a lot of towns with these property.
Yeah, everywhere.
Okay, yep. Dean, you and I talked yesterday about Tehran, Venezuela, Federal Reserve, maybe Minneapolis, all these frictional hotspots, domestic and abroad. What is catching your eye, as we go forward here, in terms of any one of these that you think is just a quick update from your expertise?
Well, I mean, I think they're all very interesting, and I like to look for kind of the bigger picture, kind of the bigger ways in which what we're seeing on the ground may be testing kind of our notion of presidential power, congressional power, et cetera. And so all those different episodes that you just mentioned all fit into this larger issue of, in what ways is the president or is he not still constrained by checks and balances, institutional barriers? Internationally, Trump made that comment recently about how he only really feels like he's constrained by his own morality. He doesn't really need international law. And so for me, you could pick any one of these cases and look at what the president is doing or says he's going to do, look at how Congress is or is not responding, and just try to understand, is Stephen Miller right? That this is simply a function of, if you have the power, you can use it, and people can't really stop you. And so for me, it doesn't matter which issue we talk about. I'm always sort of assessing kind of what is this telling us about the underlying balance or lack of balance in our institutions in the country.
Interesting. Yeah. And there's enough there that I don't know how some people keep up with it. Envy. All right, Dean, thank you very much. You're going a little bit earlier. Dean Spogliota, Southern New Hampshire University political science professor, one of the best. Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Jack.
All right. When we come back, someone who broke the story yesterday on a change of Republican state leadership next.
107.7
Jack Keith on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, welcome back. Interesting. I saw one of the WMUR a story. First district congressional candidate challenges opponents to get off social media for 1 month. That would be a good, what do they do? Dry January? Is that what you call it? Dry January? Get off social media. Try that for everyone out there sometimes. Hey, Google, hey, Wax Up by the Pulse of an H. Welcome back. And I think we're going to get a quick check-in. Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal. First to report, as far as I knew yesterday, first to report, NH Journal, a changing of the guard for the Republican executive, the chairperson of the Republican State Party yesterday, Jim McEachern, I believe, announcing yesterday morning he's out, and the Rochester mayor, Republican, the new chair of the Republicans, and Michael Graham joining us this morning for a quick check-in. How are you, sir?
Well, it's interesting how rare the New Hampshire Republican Party, the actual apparatus itself, matters or makes news. It's kind of like the John Kuiper of New Hampshire politics. No one takes it very seriously. It doesn't really do a lot, but it makes news. And people are hoping that'll change with Rochester Mayor Paul Callahan. He actually went out and got votes in a purplish city, so maybe make a difference. But there's just, as long as you have a volunteer GOP versus a fully staffed and paid New Hampshire Democratic Party overseen by Ray Buckley, it's just, it's going to be two different worlds. But yeah, we had the story first and we reported it, and that's why you got to subscribe to the free newsletter, nhjournal.com. Speaking of Buckley, did you see that Ray Buckley is sending out videos claiming that the 2024 election was stolen from Kamala Harris by evil voting machine technology? It was just absolutely hilarious, Jack.
I missed that one. I apologize. It's amazing what I can miss.
Stolen from Kamala. And this is Ray Buckley sending this crap out. You guys gone nuts. But speaking of nuts, the biggest nut in America and New Hampshire politics today is this guy on the radio named Jack Keith.
Why?
Who's complaining about property taxes as though the citizens should rise up. Jack, the citizens rise up every 2 years. They go to the polls. They elect people, and those people spend their money, and then they re-elect those people.
No.
Because it's what they want. That's exactly what happens.
No, Mr. Graham, you're off.
It's
what
not.
happens?
It's not with the kids today, Jack.
No, what happens is what happens in America. 8 out of 10 people are too busy just working and doing their thing every day. They drive better than people that drive into rotaries and don't yield. They obey the laws and respect them. They're too busy working. It's the 20% or 10% that go to these meetings in towns and keep voting to raise property taxes, because 80% who pay the bill, they're too busy and they don't go. Now, people should go. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, in these towns that keep raising property taxes, you're going to start losing seniors that can't afford to spend $14,000, $15,000, $16,000 a year to live in Dover and Bedford. Start giving a senior that has no one in schools a break. Start giving police officers, school teachers, nurses, and firefighters a break if they work in town. And you're going to still find a way to run your hold on. $28,000 a year. Let me finish my show. $28,000 a year is enough to spend on students for public education. Some people can't afford to send their kid to UNH at $30,000 a year. So stop charging that much to run a town.
But once again, if the seniors want the break, all they got to do is show up and vote the people out. Here's what happened. When the Kearsarge district said, you know what, we think $27,000 for 180 instructional days is enough. You can go to UNH on that. Let's do that. And what happened? The voters poured in, more than 1,600 people, the largest town meeting or district meeting ever, and they defeated the cap 1,400 to 100, Jack. That was the vote. And so now they're spending $33,000 for 180 instructional days for average test scores.
So what's the definition of taxation insanity? Keep doing the same thing and expect different results?
Jack, that's called look. H.L. Mencken said it best. Democracy is the theory that the common man knows what he wants and deserves to get it, good and hard. And so the people of Dover are getting it good and hard, and the people of Nashville are getting it good and hard. And as long as they keep voting, what happened in the State House last week? Republicans said, we're going to put a cap in place. You can only raise spending inflation plus population growth, which of course is the opposite because population isn't growing. School populations have gone down 20%.
Oh, I know. That's the irony in a lot of this, although I have a kid who's in the...
Who killed it? Republicans crossed over to kill it because they're from towns, squishy, towns where the local town officials said, we have to spend more money. Look what's happening in Claremont. Claremont had $5 million disappeared. Nobody is going to get voted off the Claremont School District Board. Nobody for losing $5 million. The voters get what they want, and you're never going to win an election by saying spend less money on schools.
Are you done? Are you done?
I'm done.
And this isn't even Maine or Massachusetts. We're talking New Hampshire. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah. The hard thing is, and I think regardless of elections in terms of who shows up and who doesn't, even if you have people that want to spend, there's never going to, let me just tell you something. It's called common sense. There's never going to be enough money, ever, to repair all the potholes in the roads in the spring and to get the best schools and best teachers and special education dollars with decline. There's never going to be enough money. But I'll tell you right now, I remember when Connecticut told its taxpayers, hey, we're going to get 2 really big casinos called Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods, and we're only going to temporarily put in an income tax, and you're going to spend less for your property. And the opposite one happened. Maine, income and sales tax. They don't have enough money up there, and property taxes are through the roof. But the doozies are where I went to college, University of Vermont, Burlington, or Vermont. Vermont loves taxes so much, they actually have what they call a progressive income tax. So if you make $240,000 a year, it's about 8.75%. And they have double-digit property tax increases in Vermont. Massachusetts, oh, they love taxes there. They even have a millionaire's tax. And then they have a regular income tax, and they have a sales tax. There's never going to be enough money. And if anyone tells you they can lower your property taxes by bringing an income tax, I have some really wonderful oceanfront property for you in Columbus, Ohio. If you believe that. Taxes go one way in life. They go up. But these town managers have a moral and fiscal responsibility. If a 70-year-old senior citizen has lived in Dover, New Hampshire for 50 years, 50, and they're being priced out of their home because you're taxing them $14,000 a year and they used to spend $3,000 and they have no kids in schools, let the person stay in their town and their home and charge them less. Why the hell is that so complicated? Commentary, 603-228-2080. Coming up, we're going to introduce you to a orthopedic surgeon. I don't know much about him other than he's was a pretty good hockey player, my friend tells me. But recently completed, I think, a robotic shoulder replacement. And having loved ones in my life, but thank goodness I'm not going to let him near me because my shoulders, but my smarter, prettier, better half, couple sister-in-laws, my sister, shoulder surgery is no slam dunk, meaning the surgery is not the challenge, it's the recovery. So the less invasive you can do it on you, the patient, this is pretty cool stuff. And where is it happening? Right here in New Hampshire. We'll come back with that. A little bit later on, we're going to introduce you to one of our, also Mike Cody, New Hampshire Business Review. While we talk about property taxes going through the roof here in New England, some states want to get rid of them all, property taxes altogether. Mike's going to talk about Florida and the president and Ron DeSantis down there. Not too happy that people move there so they can afford to live there, but lately they can't afford to retire there. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. J-Dog on the boards. Go to the top of the 10 o'clock hour. Well, we know two things. Although J-Dog says he may not be done. Aaron Rodgers probably should retire. Patriots will face the Texans this weekend. We got some other stuff. Bruins back in action tonight. I think we'll have that for you on the Pulse against the Red Wings. 7:30 or 7 o'clock?
7 p.m. pregame, 7:35 face-off because it's the NHL on TNT tonight, so that's why it's a later start.
And how do you love these Bruins? Saturday against the Rangers. That was
Original
fun to watch.
franchise and the Red Wings.
6 assists by Pasternak. I think the last time was Kenny Hodge and 2 hat tricks. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, the illustrious one. J-Dog on the boards. Back in a moment.